Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast here at Garage 42 in our brand new studio. It's springtime. The cars are coming back out, and I'm so excited to become a driver once again, and not just a winter commuter salting up my GX 460, but thankfully not salting up the Honda Civic Type R. But first, thank you to Garage 42 here in Acton, Massachusetts, where you can store all of your toys. They've got white glove service to make sure that your cars are always fresh, clean, taken care of in a secure and climate-controlled environment. Not to mention the fact that they have some great in-house services. They could do your oil changes. They can get you inspection stickers. They can swap out your tires. And I don't just mean on your summer wheels. I'm talking about they've got Tire Mountain Balance, Hunter stuff, the good stuff. So you're going to get a nice smooth ride if you need to have that stuff done and you don't want to have to ferry stuff around. So check out Garage 42 for all your storage needs. And this is a free podcast. So if you do want to throw a couple bucks, buy me a coffee, go ahead to the Patreon and I don't know, $1 a month. I don't need much. I would rather have like 1,000 people giving $1 a month than like individuals throwing 50s at me. Then there's pressure.
The Bernie Sanders approach.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Throw me that dollar, throw me that quarter, that's good. But yeah, if you do want to support what we're doing here, I'd love to get some more advertisers on board. We've been getting a couple sponsors on the YouTube channel, which has been fun. I've been, drinking some AG1. Ooh. That's been interesting. This is not sponsored by them, but feel free to watch the Jag video if you'd like to see that. It's funny because not just because of the SpawnCon, but I'm proud of like the B-roll stuff that I shoot with those.
Heck yeah.
I have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
So it's a great time. And our other friends over at Grid Forge, who make these incredible plaques. That's my buddy's company. Again, not sponsoring this podcast, but I just like them. And if you want like a cool plaque that has Laguna Seca with this 3D model of the track, go check it out. I'll put it in the show notes. They're fun. But anyway, today is all about the car industry, things that we like, things that I'm becoming a little bit of a curmudgeon in, because today my guest is one of the most, I have to say, you are like one of the most knowledgeable people. This is Thanasi Chakiadakis, Money Shift. You can find his podcast. You can find his YouTube channel. We'll put that in the show notes. You can plug whatever the heck you want to say. But you are like first of all, your energy always makes me very happy. I like being around you. I feel like that's going away in the car industry. I'm getting a little, everyone's very know-it-all-y. And I'm sure I'm guilty of that sometimes too. So it's fresh to talk to you when I'm having real questions.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
But the other thing is your full-time gig is not this car thing. You're an enthusiast first. And then you've got this great Money Shift thing going on in your spare time, which I always like watching. And I always respect your reviews because you are one of the few people who does something really insane. You buy all the cars well, not all of them, but like a lot. You go through a lot of cars. You go through like, is it safe to say 4 or 5 cars a year?
I think the number in the last 2 years is right around, we'll call it 8.
8.
And it's all over the map. We're going from Ford Mavericks to Polestars to Broncos to Kona Ns to, we're all over the place.
Which is what I like the most about your style, because I am the anti-loyalist. I fell into the loyalist trap as a youngster. So I wanted BMWs. You gotta
I was just going to ask.
Gotta have that German V8. Then I became a Porsche guy. And I don't have the money to be a Porsche guy, but I have a Porsche. Before they skyrocketed. So now I look like I could be a Porsche guy. But
yes.
I don't have that. Now I really couldn't be a Porsche guy. There's not enough
possible.
Cards.
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy. Still love the brands.
Right.
Not necessarily BMW. They've kind of like fizzled out in my, just not what but this is why I wanted to have you on. All right. So here's the thing. The thesis of today. I had a birthday a week ago.
22.
22.
Congratulations.
Again.
Big milestone.
Oh, God. I hope not, because my back tells me I'm definitely in my mid-30s. So I had a birthday, and then the next day immediately threw out my back in a way that I have never experienced in my life. The most excruciating pain. All I was doing, because I try to be a little athletic. Like I run. I've been lifting again.
Yeah, yep.
And I used to lift in college. No one believes me when I say that, because I am
Why not?
tiny.
Okay.
But, so getting back into lifting for the last couple months. And all I'm doing is I have 2 dumbbells. They're 45 pounds. No, not bragging.
Yeah, hey, light work. Anyway.
I'm getting up from a flat bench and putting a dumbbell on the ground.
Okay.
That twisting motion created a giant pop in my lower right back and pretty much laid on the floor for 3 days. Just excruciating.
It's the worst because like I have carpal tunnel, and I promise there's a connection here. When I was younger, playing games, doing whatever, I did not know how to control a mouse. So now that I'm older in a desk job, that's coming back to bite me. Yeah. Whereas when I learned that initial behavior, you're invincible. You can bounce back from whatever, right? If this was 10 years ago, you throw that dumbbell to the side like you did, you feel nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And I've done it terribly. I've had poor form and everything.
Right.
So all this to say is I'm getting older, and I know I'm physically getting older because of certain little injuries like this, but I also find myself being a little bit jaded and stale on the car industry.
Oh,
and what I was hoping that you could bring to the table today is to inspire me to be excited about things that are upcoming. Because I want to actively not become one of those guys who says they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah.
And just, I don't want to be the guy on Facebook being like, EVs are ruining the world.
Yeah,
and I don't want to be the guy who's just like missing out on cool stuff.
Sure.
I don't want to be the guy who is like, Dua Lipa? Who the hell is that?
Yeah.
Just listen to some music. It's okay. I listen to a lot of new music. Some of it's not my style, but I'm not going to complain that, who is this? It's funny. Now it honestly makes me sound old because I almost just said, who is this Machine Gun Kelly? That's already passe.
I love that.
It's already old news.
Yeah.
But like, we had this whole mumble rap. What about P. Diddy?
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
P. Diddy.
Guess what? What about P. Diddy?
Yeah, true.
Somebody is actually escaping helicopters on a yacht right now.
Insane. My I grow up is now I like beige interior.
Oh yeah. I when I bought my GX 460, they tried to sell me on like a beige or kind of sandy stuff.
Yeah.
And
was it cheaper than not?
No.
Oh, interesting.
It was like the same, but I definitely had to like be like, no. Even though deep down I was kind of, this looks pretty, this is pretty lively. This is pretty lovely.
Well, old Lexus beige is bad. Like, meaning in life, right?
Yes.
As it ages, it's horrible. Brand new looks great. But I don't know how that'll look in like 5-10 years.
The issue I have with it, this is such a sidebar, but is that the plastic beige looked different than the fabric or like leather beige.
Oh, wow. Okay,
and,
sure.
And every time you open the door, you see it.
Yeah,
and you go,
no.
Yeah.
Right,
Whereas
correct.
with my red like faux leather interior, all the plastic is black. So you don't get the contrast. They didn't try. And I was like, good, don't try.
Yeah,
Just let it be.
Don't force it.
Yeah, don't try to make two materials. That's why PTS is so expensive when you do certain things, because trying to paint match a plastic bumper cover to a steel body panel or aluminum body panel, very difficult.
Totally.
Like, you look at my Lexus, the bumper is a completely different white than the body panels. But anyway, so all this to say is I want to generate some forward thinking into being jazzed and excited about the auto industry again, because when I was just out of college, fresh out of college, it was around like 2010.
Yep.
This was, to me, and maybe it was just because of the age I was, but to me, this was like the peak of auto journalism being part of like the everyday zeitgeist.
Okay. Say more on that. What do you mean?
So we had the YouTube side of it where you had like the Drive Network, and so we were always watching anything JF produced.
Okay.
On top of that, so if you weren't getting a show that day, whether it was tuned or whatever, who was ever doing whatever,
right?
That was a very thoughtful sentence. there was Autoblog, there was Jalopnik,
Yeah.
there was Motor One, and all this stuff. And I religiously read everything.
Yeah, totally.
So if BMW came out with an idea for an LCI 5 Series, I knew about it.
Yeah, right.
I wasn't going to buy that.
Yeah.
I didn't care, but I needed to know.
Okay.
And I was excited. I was like, "Oh my god, did you know that they're going to go to LED tails for the thing?" And everyone around me was like, "Oh, we don't care." But now I'm the guy who doesn't care, and I want to care.
Got
So,
it.
I mean, there's some heavy hitters
Yep.
that are coming out that I am kind of excited about.
Okay.
And I'll just name one just to kind of set a little
Yeah,
tone.
sure.
Corvette ZR1.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm like psyched about this.
Okay. Interesting. I kind of go the opposite direction.
Excellent.
But okay, so
And that's how writing is done.
I'll start off by saying I think right now today, April, whatever it is.
Sure. It's April 17th. Happy birthday, Mom.
Hey, happy birthday, Mrs. Tedward. April 17, 2024. I think right now we are in a better car world than we were even 20 years ago. On average.
Oh, I love
so
that you're
that
saying
doesn't mean that every brand is better than they were 20 years ago. But what that does mean is by and large, the entire industry is better than what it was 20 years ago. If you want to do 15, we could do 15, but I'm saying right around that 28 or 28, yeah. 2008, we did
Yeah.
it to 2010 mark compared to now, we're above that point.
What do you see as the markers for that?
The markers for me are diversity in each segment. And I know a lot of folks are saying like, well, when I was young, we had infinite coupe options. We had all the sedans, and sure, okay, if you look at it on a stat sheet, there might have been 20 sedans in 2008, but there's only 5 now. But I would bet that those 5 that are out now, all of them are solid. Versus back then, of the 20, maybe one of them was any good.
That's a really good point because let's take a walk back. We're a similar age, right?
Yeah, I'm 31.
31. Okay, so you maybe
That hurt to
still. Yeah, it's tricky. It'll get really easy. You'll be thrilled that it's so low, but maybe you're still old enough that when you went to high school, people drove Pontiac Sunfires,
Yeah,
or
big
Chevy
time.
Cavaliers.
I secretly like the Sunfire, but anyway.
I think they're like ironically cool.
Yeah, like The Room is a good movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like if you handed me a Ford Escort key, I'd be thrilled.
Right, correct.
But I
Yeah.
also relentlessly made fun of them when they were new because I was
yes.
like, that is a tin can.
Exactly.
It is built to be just a bean counter's dream of margins. And it's kind of scary because on a level of safety for teenagers, they were going to get crashed. And
Right.
there wasn't much to them. And they were going to get crashed at speed because those
Right. kids
kids were going to use them. It's like a Pontiac Grand Am, Pontiac Grand Prix. Like those cars had too much power for the people who were actually driving them at the time. And you're right. Like maybe there were more sedans or coupes available at the time, but we're not talking about like Accord V6 manual. We're talking like 3-speed automatic 4-cylinder.
Yeah, totally.
with-
The Taurus, garbage.
Right.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
and cars
horrible.
that people could die in.
Right. Also true.
And and this is a hard thing to talk about because although as far as I know, the stats, unfortunately, traffic deaths are up per capita.
Right.
The cars are, I feel oddly like much safer throwing a teenager into a modern car than like a Pontiac Sunfire. Because
Yeah, it's
and I'm so sorry.
distracted driving, right? Like
Yes.
that's, it's not actual car safety.
Right.
Like you would die in a Ford Ranger, but you'll really die in an old Ford Ranger today.
Yeah, and I get that a lot on the videos where like I did a video on a Ford Bronco 2.
Okay, wow.
Right.
Nice.
Now, that was like a dream.
Yeah.
Because it is the ironic, like, that car is notorious mostly for lawsuits. I mean, other than the Ford Explorer and the whole Firestone deal.
Right.
That car is like the one. That's like the rollover poster child for SUVs. Now, the thing is, people in the comments will be like, well, I owned one and I never rolled it. And I'm like, we're not saying that everyone rolled them. We're just saying statistically.
Yeah, right.
They
in
were,
general.
they were pretty dangerous. And they're like, well, all you had to do was not be an idiot. And it was like, well, here's the thing. a lot of people maybe were bad drivers.
Right.
I'm sure people rode them due to some negligence.
Sure.
And, they provoked the vehicle's dynamics to be, out of whack. That CG goes outside of the car, it rolls.
Right.
Now, the other side of this, which is the more likely scenario, which is what I think all cars need to be able to do, is avoid something suddenly. And that means that the average driver will turn and brake.
Right.
If it can't do that consistently,
Yeah, we have a problem.
then we have a problem. Right. And it's like, I always think it's so myopic and thoughtless to say like, well, if these idiot drivers, I'm like, so my friend Corey, her mother just got in a terrible car accident. She's okay.
Okay,
Thank God.
Good news.
I'm only telling this because of that. But she had like a 90s Jeep Wrangler.
Okay, sure.
And she was driving out in kind of central Mass, hit a little patch of ice, and the car got upset, and she rolled it.
Whoa.
And it's the typical Wrangler roll, the typical Bronco 2 roll. Like, it's not something that we haven't seen before. She's had this car like since 1998 or something.
Since then.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this car is not, so if anything, if someone was telling her that vehicle was dangerous, she maybe would have been the one that's like, well, I've been driving mine for 20 something years. Like, they're fine.
Right.
It's when something unexpected happens. And this is the same argument that when you were 11 years old, you'd be like, hey, maybe you should wear a helmet. They're like, well, I've never crashed my bike before.
Yeah, couldn't be me.
Couldn't be me. So I'm like, well, it really could be, because
Yeah.
it's just going to take a little bit of unforeseen circumstances
Right.
to upset the thing. So in this regard, I am thrilled that cars do seem to be more stable. And
Right.
and it's weird because the SUV hatred in the late 90s, early 2000s from like a lot, like, oh no, all we're getting are these rollover SUVs. Well, they're not really like that anymore.
Right.
Because I can take an X5 sideways at 100.
Yeah.
If you so choose.
Right.
And it'll be stable.
100%.
And it's incredible.
Right.
I'm not saying they're all going to pass the Moose test like a
Sure.
like a Veyron, but
Yeah, no. Well, even if we go back to sedans, like look at the big ones available today. Brand new Hyundai Sonata, great machine
absolutely
for all intents and purposes. The Accord, great machine,
fantastic chassis.
And you just keep going down the line. Every new sedan, there might be a flavor that's better for you. Maybe you want the one wheel peel in the Sonata N line with a boatload of horsepower and a good looking package. Maybe you want the efficiency in the Accord with all the tech and the comfortable ride, whatever that is. But the options are there for you today where they weren't there for you in the past. You either had to go up a price bracket or you just didn't, like, it wasn't available for you.
How do we feel about power? All right. One of the big things that automakers have done for many years was use their specs as a sales pitch, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we get the horsepower wars between like AMG and BMW M and the Audi RS cars and stuff. It was always just this one upping each other to be like, well, we have 400 horsepower. Well, we have 450. Well, we have 500. Now, what I'm noticing is a lot of like sort of ordinary cars aren't really worried about that. Like, for example, I believe that a lot of like Honda cars are very modestly powered.
Yep.
They're not chasing a big number. And Honda never really did that. I think the only car right now that they say, whoa, look what we got is the Type R, where they say we have 310 horsepower.
Right.
Or 5. I don't remember what it is. And you owned a Acura Integra Type S.
Yep.
Another
tremendous
car.
machine.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like mind blown that you could sell that. Because, but
so was I.
But it's so odd because we live in this really strange thing where you could buy a new, let's say, Accord Sport Touring with the hybrid system. It's not a punchy car.
Right.
It's adequately powered and it's fine. You could alternatively buy like a Model 3 Performance with, similar price, slightly smaller car. So not exactly a head-to-head, but just for example.
Close enough.
That's, what is that, like 600 horsepower?
Yeah, it's mental. Yeah.
So how do we, in this modern era, what are the things that we're supposed to look forward to? Because I look forward to, as a hopefully nuanced and talented, lover of cars, I'm so thrilled about like chassis, right? So like that's just one of the reasons why I think the 11th gen Civic is like the coolest thing in the world, because I don't care if that car has 70 horsepower. the way that handles and behaves
Yeah.
is phenomenally good. And I just remember driving that car and thinking, wow, this is what the entry level is. Insane. This is beyond.
So that actually is exactly why you should be excited about today's world, because car companies now, outside of the Ram high output, which is coming to replace the TRX or the ZR1 or whatever, cars like that are going to be, you know, always stat chasers, crazy horsepower, unbelievable numbers, the 911 Turbo S's of the world, things like that. The rest of the car market is focusing a lot more on either efficiency, tech, or just your overall user experience, because it's understood that if you provide a better experience, or a better appealing package visually, or, you know, more efficient or whatever that is, that's actually what gets people out the door. And that's what keeps them with you. Because if you're doing this whole, like, I have more horsepower than you have more horsepower than me, and you cultivate that sort of environment, what ends up happening is just the market goes wherever the most is. But now if you're leaning into your own self and you're saying, we're going to create good machines that are us, i.e. the brand new Civic, the brand new Accord, I don't know, even the Sonata, a lot of the Hyundai products. I keep going back to Hyundai, but a lot of those products. Then what you start to do is you foster this notion of like brand loyalty by creating good machines, which is what a lot of these car companies want to do, because that's how you keep folks in the organization and all that stuff, right? So I think that period is sort of what we're coming back to. And in a lot of the different categories, there are good machines coming or already available. I mean, outside, I have a 24 Toyota Tacoma. It is a brand new 2.4 liter turbo engine that's in everything, right? From a Lexus RX to a Highlander to the Tacoma. But it has an old school direct drive transmission, which isn't better than a good transmission, to be very clear. Right? If I get into your Type R, that is objectively a better transmission. But this one just feels good, right? It doesn't hit that stat line. It doesn't hit the best of whatever, but I'm driving a good machine. And that, to me, is what we're coming back to in a lot of respects, whether that's nostalgia becoming more popular, right? I go back to watches sometimes. Vintage Cartier is influencing new Cartier, things like that.
Sure.
But it's also just what brands are seeing the market needs. And I love that.
Now, oh God, there's so many directions we can go from there. All right. I want to, you brought up the nostalgia vibe. I am of the opinion, and it's not substantiated very well, but the hypothesis, when brands look backwards, it's a sign they're struggling.
Okay.
Like if you are doing a retrospective design that's supposed to be the latest and greatest, but it looks like something that you did in the 1960s.
Okay.
It's often not done well.
Okay.
And it, to me, says you're trying to recuperate a lost relationship.
Ah, interesting.
And it's like, remember when we had those good times before I was...
Look how pretty I was.
Before I was drinking and cheating on you.
Yeah. Sure.
Come on, don't you remember Acapulco?
Yeah.
It was wonderful. You know, like, and so I always have this little bit of vibe where like, they're going backwards, which is what I think is so cool about brands like Hyundai. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Hyundai and Genesis, and Kia for that matter, they are actually forward-looking in design without dipping their toe behind them in the pool of nostalgia.
You don't want a brand new Hyundai Scoop? Not Scoop, but you know what I mean. I called it the Scoop. Yeah.
That's funny. But like, exactly, like I think there's a level of like risk taking to it, but I think a lot of brands are afraid to take a risk.
Okay.
Now, there's another side to this where I want to talk about Toyota, because you just bought into the new Toyota design language. Mm-hmm. I'm of two minds with Toyota's new design language. I'm of the one mind where I'm like, well, that's outrageous and crazy. Kind of the way people thought about FK8 Type R.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Where they're like, I used to call it an anime haircut.
Yeah, it's the Gundam of cars.
It is. Mm-hmm. And now I see Toyota's that's not a mainstream car. It's mainstream as far as like a sports car goes, but it's not like their bread and butter. They didn't make an Accord look like that.
Right.
Toyota is going to be selling Tundras and Sequoias and Forerunners. These cars are extreme. They are really extreme looking. And that's, I think, a bold, exciting risk to take in the main public market, because you're not just testing the waters to see if people are going to buy like your Type R.
Right.
Your Forerunner, you kidding me? Tacoma, these are cars that everyone's going to buy.
Yeah.
These are off-roaders. These are soccer moms. These are just ordinary people. These are people who just have one car in their entire family in the city and park it in Philadelphia and never move it again because they'll lose their parking space. Like that's what a Forerunner is, right? It does everything. I'm both so of two minds. One, I'm really thrilled that they're taking some risks, and two, I'm kind of like, ugh,
yeah,
that's really
change sucks.
Yeah,
and that's what they're trying to push,
and that's what I'm trying to not become. I don't like that. My instinct is to kind of like be negative about it. I don't want to be negative. I want to be like, wow, look at those flares, look at the arches, look at the because I do think it tastefully looks backwards a little bit. It's not a retrospective car.
Definitely. It's touches, not full the same.
I see a little bit of third gen in it, and I'm like, ooh, that was my favorite Forerunner. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the reason. Like, oh, I could have grown up in a third gen. So maybe that's why they're doing it. Same with like Porsche, their 992. They went to G model style, where like they have square mirrors and they have square frunk lid, which has been rounded up until 991.
Right.
That was because round was beautiful, but
right.
now square is beautiful because
right.
we're going back into like an 80s vibe. So everything's
right.
getting square and
right.
wild. What do you think about like should companies be conservative? Should they worry about public perception? I mean, I think, and before I let you answer, I want to bring up Chevy as well, because I think Chevy figured it out. Like they kind of came through this weird phase in the previous gen Colorado, for example. It was like almost a little too plasticky. And now you see like a Colorado ZR2 and you're like, that's it, proportionally dead on, kind of crazy lines if you were to see it in a drawing, but in person, you're like, this is it. And I'm not like, I was never like a Chevy truck guy.
Right.
And now I'm like, God, that's beautiful. So what do you think about like design language? Is it gonna alienate people? Is it going to be like, there are some like conservative folks that I'm like, I cannot picture these people driving like a lime green Forerunner in this shape.
Yeah. I think that's another exciting thing about this market is that there are the Forerunners of the world that are nutty, kind of crazy, outlandish lines, boxy fenders, whatever that is. But then there's also the total opposite with like a CRV where it's not offensive at all, but it's still a pretty good machine.
It's crazy you brought up the CRV because I don't want to say secretly because it's not like I'm ashamed of it. I think the new CRV is like one of the most proportionally beautiful.
I almost bought one instead of this.
It's so good.
I'm not kidding. It's too good to ignore. I agree.
It's the best looking car Honda makes.
Yeah.
And that's not like to say anything negative about the rest of their cars, but it's kind of like, remember when Audi really like honed in their style and you had like the A8 and everything was just a smaller version of it.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
by the time you got to like an A3, you were like, ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, I see A8 in it, but yikes.
Yeah.
I think CRV is their A8. It's like, it just hits every line. There's not a single angle. And people have kind of said, they stole a little bit of inspiration from Volvo XC60 or whatever. I'm like, they perfected it.
Can I just say as a quick, very quick aside, there are in the car market in general, blatant copies. We're talking like very clear. But the thing that I hate the most, and I use hate, full knowing, it's a strong word, okay, is that whenever there is a new car launch, there is a race to take the press photo and then put a photo of a car that like loosely has the same shape underneath and to be like, wow, they straight up copied it. Shut your mouth. First off, you're incorrect. Like, just look at them, okay? Second off, we're hundreds of years into the car process. Okay. There's bound to be some elements, we call them trends.
Thank you.
That come up where cars look largely similar. Okay. Now there's blatant ripoffs. The Santa Fe's steering wheel is a Land Rover Defender steering wheel, and I won't be convinced otherwise. But I also think they look different visually. Like, yes, the Santa Fe is a box. Yes, there are elements of Defender, but park them next to each other. They look drastically different.
Yes.
Right? So that's where I start to sort of lose it. But that's also the exciting part about today, is that you have, on the one hand, the Forerunners of the world, the Corvettes, the Amiras, these crazy designs that just look painfully beautiful. You have this middle ground, which I'll just call the Z, right? It's not crazy beautiful, but it's not sterile either.
It's not
and then
stale.
you have sterile. It's there for you. Do you not want to make a statement? Go get a Ford Maverick. It does everything right. It doesn't do anything wrong for the most part.
It almost makes a statement by being normal.
Yeah, it's not offensive at all.
It's normcore.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But we have that today where vehicles in all those categories are actually good. Right? Where that wasn't true 10 years ago. That wasn't true 15 years ago. If I got the most basic of basics 10, 15 years ago, that car sucked.
It sucked.
You know what I mean?
You were still
Versus
getting
now.
roll-up windows and non-power locks.
Yeah.
And things. It's funny you mentioned that too, because I remember. I mean, what was everyone's big complaint about the Type R? It doesn't have heated seats. It's like, your Civic doesn't have heated seats. Can you imagine bitching about that in like 2005?
I still get on my Type S video where I talked about the 5 things I would change about it. Yeah, this for me doesn't have a sunroof, dude. How does it not have a sunroof? $52,000. How does it not have a sunroof? Because that's not what you're buying the car for.
No, and unfortunately, I think a lot of comments come from people that don't understand purpose.
Sure.
And I'm sure I've done that. I'm
Yeah.
sure I've driven things where I'm like, oh man, this is like a bear to drive. And maybe some off-road people are like, well, because it's a truck.
Yeah.
But
It's on purpose. Yeah.
Even trucks are insanely good. I had a 6.6 liter Duramax diesel 2500 HD Sierra.
Hilarious.
And I'm like, this is the easiest thing to drive.
Yeah, my father has a Denali 2500, same thing. Yeah.
It's like more comfortable than my GX460. It's crazy. What about the enthusiast? So I think overall, we've talked about like how, sure, like design's getting more exciting, and I'm trying to get behind that because and the thing with, like, for example, with EVs, I'm not going to poo-poo EVs. I think the only thing that bothers me about EVs is that they're all like very, and I know this isn't really correct from an engineering standpoint, but to me, let's just take it like at face value. They're all like the same skateboard or platform, or like, great, you've got a thing with the motors and some batteries, great. And then everything around it is just to be visually appealing versus like functional, I guess, or something. And to me, I think one of the most annoying examples of this, for example, is like a BMW iX. You look at the front of it and it has like a kidney grill, but there's no grill. It's just a shape of it. And I'm like, oh, like, why? And it bothers me. But not only that, everything's very flat.
Sure.
Like, for example, even Mercedes, I think, is guilty of this. Their new design language, it's very slab-sided. Everything is very flat. And to me, I see cost cutting in that because I'm like, oh, you want your tooling to last longer.
Yeah. Right.
You don't want to have any shapes in here because it might cost you more money in the long run. Should we be like, how do we get excited as enthusiasts about future powertrains and future, like, what future powertrains should we be excited about? Because there's a lot of like quote unquote last ofs coming up.
Sure.
Is kind of what like C8 ZR1 feels like, which is why maybe that is me just being an old curmudgeon saying like, oh my God, twin turbo V8, the mid-engine. I mean, that's crazy. It's absolutely outrageous.
So just continuing the hot take, today is the best time if you are in the market for a new vehicle as an enthusiast. It's the best time that it's been in the last 20 years.
What do we buy? What do we get?
So on the low end, you have your FRSs, which is now the GT86. I'm sorry, Scion, Toyota. I apologize.
Honestly, rest in peace.
Yeah, never forget. Let's be honest, never forget.
I might smoke a cigarette.
I
after
need
this.
an XB. Bring it back. Anyway, so
Please
you
don't
have
smoke.
the 8.6.
Yeah.
You have the WRX, which somehow manages to still be a near 300 horsepower manual all-wheel drive car with CarPlay, with all these different features for 30 Gs.
Congratulations, Subaru, for keeping this car going, because also the rest of their lineup does feel like cars built by people who take the train to work.
Yeah, oh, without a doubt.
And
Yeah.
that's like weird to me because I'm like, the WRX is like a good to drive car. Now,
For a great price.
thank you. That is nuts.
Yeah.
Things are expensive. So let's keep going with this like lower end or middle tier
I mean,
market.
we'll just keep going up. Elantra N, 34 Gs. Unbelievable
Such
machine.
a good car.
By the way, they perfected the 2000s Honda in that Elantra N for me. Right? The
that's a
Civic
good
Si, another great option, but it's a lot more tame than it used to be.
Yes.
Which is why I call the Elantra N like that vintage Civic Si kind of. Has a little bit of torque steer, has that like fun, playful soul. But the new refresh, my goodness, looks incredible.
I find the SI, because of the chassis of the 11th Gen Civic, to be a better driving car than the Elantra N.
Yeah,
I find the Elantra, and it could be tires. I did an autocross with an Elantra N, and it was pushy.
Yeah.
And I felt myself really having to struggle to get grip, and I was like, this is annoying. Whereas then in the other products, I didn't have that.
Sure, but in my mind, there's a beauty to the imperfection.
Agreed.
Like you, who is it? I think it was Albert Bierman that talked about the Veloster N, where it purposefully torque steers. They're like, yes, we could tune it out of it, but that's the magic.
It's funny you mentioned
know?
that because that was, I mean, you hear Mazda Speed 3.
Yeah.
Say a word, torque steer.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was part of the charm.
Right, right.
It was not something that was like, oh, I wouldn't buy one because. It was like, I would buy one because of that.
Yeah,
and hilarious.
And all these cars we listed are sub 40. Now, the average price of the car today is 47, 48 Gs. So if you go up to that price bracket, you have Golf R, Civic Type R, Integra Type S, you have Nissan Z, you have Mustang GT.
You're so good at this.
All of these cars.
I can't do this. I can't.
Is it hot in here or is it just me?
It's you. I can't do this. I could write this out and I could be like, oh, and I have to look, and it's incredible how segmented your brain is.
It's like I look to buy cars for myself constantly.
Well, and I think this is the thing. I think I used to be able to do this, but I can't do it anymore because I'm so disheartened by stuff. But I think sometimes I'm forget. Part of me, you know, when you look at like, for example, GT86 or BRZ.
Yeah.
I love these cars, but I look at them and think like, oh, are they still actually around? Do you know, like I'm looking at like a legacy thing, WRX, I forget about because I'm like, oh my God, that's still there.
Yep.
And I almost don't give it the credit for existing.
Right.
Because I'm like, but
so, yeah,
and
which
when
is
they come
exactly what I'm trying to address when I say that like today actually is the best time.
Yeah.
And so is tomorrow. I can't speak to 5 or 10 years down the road. That I don't know.
Now, what's something aspirational? Because I have a hard time with aspirational cars now. Because I used to, my God, I mean, if Porsche launched a facelift or a new generation, it was like the only thing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, Lamborghini comes out with the Huracan. Lamborghini comes out with the Aventador. These were big moments to me.
Yeah.
They meant something to me.
Right.
BMW comes out with a new 5 Series. I need to know every detail.
Yep.
I don't know that I have like these aspirational goals anymore for like supercars. And maybe that's maturity.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe it's because they're so unobtainable in terms of price and exclusivity.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be a VVIP to get one of those.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Which is another, that could be an 18-hour long podcast in and of itself, from companies like Porsche to companies like Rolex and everybody in between.
Absolutely.
Ugh, the notion that you have to like go into your dealer with coffee and be like a person, like on an emotional level, in order to have the chance to get something.
Yes.
I had someone tell me there was a 3-year wait
Money's
on
not-
a watch, never mind a car. I'm like, I looked at the person in the eye. I was like, 3 years? Are we serious with that? 3 years? Like, what are we? Hate it.
What should we be looking like? All right.
Yeah.
If I'm pretend I'm, you know, the aspirationally ripe age of 25.
Yeah,
I'm
I love that.
starting my career.
Right.
I'm you know, maybe I'm an engineer, maybe I'm a finance bro, maybe I'm making 80 grand a year, maybe I'm making 150, but I'm sitting there going like, ooh, in a few years, I'm going to pull into this industrial complex or pull into my parking garage at work in a blank. Now,
Yeah.
if that were me at 25, I would have been saying 997 GT3.
Yeah.
I would have been saying maybe like a Huracan, or a Gallardo.
Yeah.
I could have probably swung a little lower for like a Carrera S or something, but like, and it would have looked like hot shit. Now the other side of that would have been a little more executive. Like, I did buy the E39 M5.
Yep.
Still, it was old at the time. I mean, it was still 10, about 10 years old when I bought it.
Yep.
But that's not that old.
Yep.
I could have come in with like a CLS 55 AMG,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
These are some things that were kind of in that like $40,000 to $60,000 range that like I would have had to take a loan, but I would have been approved for said loan.
Yeah. Right.
And so if you're 25 today, what are those cars? Because to me, I'm like, man, like, what's in that sort of price range?
Yeah.
We've inflated a lot. Salaries have not like gone
Sure.
the same way. I don't
Right.
care what the jobs report says. I don't know.
Yeah.
No kids getting out of college are making like 200 grand a year.
Right.
It's not happening.
Right.
So where are we at where like the aspirational, like not necessarily supercar, but
Yeah.
like what is the hot thing to get?
Yeah. So if you're in, we'll call it 60 to 100, right? Like where you get out of school and you're like, I can get a job, and then in a couple of years I'll be able to go for that thing.
Right. It's
I think-
mildly irresponsible, but you're young enough to fuck up and carry
correct.
on. Yeah.
Correct. I think for me, it's three cars really do come to mind. The first one's the Amira, 100%.
Ooh. Okay.
Right? Because that is an example of, again, like we were talking about earlier, last of, right?
Yeah.
Last internal combustion engine Lotus. It has two really intriguing power plants in the GLA 45 AMG engine with the paddle shifters, or the classic Toyota supercharged with the manual.
I consistently forget that there are two engine options for this car.
Painfully beautiful.
Yeah.
Painfully beautiful.
It is a hot thing.
And it has all the right colorways. It has a decent enough interior. You can get away with driving it every day and looking like that dude. You know what I mean?
It makes a statement, and it doesn't say jerk.
Yes,
It
correct.
says, who's that guy?
Yeah, it's intrigue.
Yeah.
It cultivates intrigue for sure.
You better want to talk about your car because people are
Yeah.
going to ask you about it. Because most people won't know what it is.
Yeah. So the second one is one that hasn't been talked about much yet because there's some rumor. So this might not actually be a thing. So if someone wants to like message in and be like, that guy's an idiot because this car's never coming out, why would he mention it?
I challenge them to challenge you.
Yeah, bring it on. Is whatever new C8 Grand Sport we get. Oh. Because we all know the ZR1, like you're talking about, is going to be earth-shattering. There's a rumor that early on in Corvette C8 development, they had already started developing this thing. So what year did C8 come out? 2018, 2019? I don't actually know.
Yeah.
We'll call it 19. 19. So they've been developing it for over 6 years, and they would have released it sooner, but it's been twisting chassis. It has so much power, and the lunatics early on in the design cycle wanted to keep it T-tops. So because it was T-tops, because it had two turbos, because it had all this power, it was twisting chassis, right? So that car's going to be mental.
People don't give GM enough credit for being fun.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway.
So that it's definitely going to be 100 plus. Going to be nuts, going to be crazy.
Well, I wonder, I mean, that's not only 100 plus, that's going to be like 175,
yeah.
you know?
I bet you pushes over two with options.
I agree.
No doubt.
Yeah. We'll see 300 on Bring It Trailer.
In
the first. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's what makes the Grand Sport so good, potentially, right? Is you keep the C8 engine, the base engine, 455 horse, whatever the hell it is, something like that.
Fantastic power plant.
Tremendous transmission. You give it even better suspension, maybe from the Z06. Literally create a Corvette C8 T. Right? We're talking Porsche language now. T.
Yeah.
Give it all the Z06 kit with the C8 engine. Presto.
What a take. It's funny because the Grand Sport cachet didn't really mainstream itself until C7.
And it didn't even till C8 where people like lusted after the C7 GS.
It was
agreed.
It's weird because so the C6 GS was a great car,
Yeah.
but no one really. They were like, oh, it's got nice brakes.
Yep.
So people weren't like. I remember, but then when it's honestly interesting that I think the failure is too big a word, but it's easier to just talk about it. The sort of failure of the C7 Z06
Oh, I think it's
Is
fair
that
to
fair?
say. Yeah.
We had some overheating issues.
Totally.
It just didn't really like meet
That was never really rectified, but anyway. Yeah.
And it kind of tainted the Z06 name for a generation because C5 and C6 Z06 were just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Even with like, dropped valves and C6, didn't matter.
Yeah.
That, like, whoa. 505 horsepower, the big, like, what a cool thing.
7 liter. Yeah. Insane.
Huge.
Yeah.
That was like a straight up like R race motor,
Right.
That they streetified,
Right.
Very cool. Grand Sport though became this like reliably attainable thing, and then in C7, holy cow, was it the pick of the litter because you could put the power down,
Right.
and it was fast on a racetrack, and you get it in manual, all this stuff. You bring up a really good point with
Yeah.
C8 Grand Sport,
Would just be a good option, and it's something that has been obviously overshadowed recently because of the ZR1's impending earth-crushing just everything.
What do we think about the, almost want to say like Porscheification of a model lineup? So for example, you get a 911, right? How many 911s exist right now? How many models? There's got to be 16 or something
It's
like
a
that.
lot.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah,
I didn't count, but it's definitely more than 10.
Yeah.
Corvette, you're going to have the standard car, you're going to have the E-Ray, you're going to have ZR1, Z06,
Yep.
Zora potentially, where you
whatever
get,
the heck.
whatever.
The E-Ray. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got like 6 or so. We're
Yeah.
putting in Grand Sport. We're at 6 or 7.
Yep.
There's going to be a Corvette for everyone,
Totally.
which is cool. And there's like sub things within that where you're like, oh, do I have like the 3LZ package or whatever? I'm really bad at that. Chevy makes it hard for me because I'm really bad at like number letter things that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like
yeah.
essentially meaningless.
Sure.
They mean something to them. Like they're codes.
And it also kind of doesn't make sense because you can get a work truck Silverado that's like 4LT, and I associate like bigger number with better thing to then have it associated with LT. It's just weird. So
I have
you're not alone.
I have a hard time with that. So that's interesting. Like that there will be sort of like a C8 for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean,
You know who's already doing that? Ford. I made a video on this, but the Mustang is a 911 for the people.
ooh,
Because you have the EcoBoost in the 30s. You can get it Cooper convertible. You have the V8 in the 40s. You have the Dark Horse in the 50s to 60s. You have the impending Shelby GT500 replacement. But if you look at the existing one, we're in the 70s to 100.
Sure.
And then you have the GTD, which is over 200.
ooh.
So you have a clearly differentiated lineup. And this is something that didn't really exist 20 years ago.
You're right.
20 years ago, you had Mustang V6, you had Mustang GT, you had Mustang California Special, which was a trim package, it wasn't anything. You had a Shelby GT 500, and then you had the 500 KR.
Right.
And then like a bastardized 350.
Sure.
But like they weren't different enough from each other, whereas now they're like a dark horse next to a base. You can tell the lineage is the same, much like you can with a 911 GTS and a 911S.
Yeah.
But it's different. And I love that. That's another thing to be excited about for today. The GTD is knuckin' futz.
Dude, I mean, that's a
It
serious
is
thing.
crazy town.
I haven't seen one in person. I'd love to. I know there's like one floating around. That
was at the New York Auto Show. I freaked out. I almost passed out right in front of it. The lady was looking at me, and it's funny because they started talking. You know how at auto shows, if you go when the lay people go, the commoners,
yes,
if you will.
Honestly, I prefer it.
Yeah, me too.
It's better. There's energy.
Yeah,
Like,
agreed.
why do I want to go to a movie by myself? Like, it'd be more fun if everyone's.
She comes out on stage right next to the GTD, and the first thing she does is point out the Mach-E to talk about Mustang lineage, which, like, you can make the argument that it's another division of Mustang, which, by the way, random side note, super fast, and I won't touch on it.
Dude,
the Mach-E rally is so rad. But anyway, we'll go
Okay.
back. And then she starts talking about the GTD, and you started to see people's faces just drop. The power, the suspension, the brakes. You're pointing out bits in the body, the aero. It's just Porsche shouldn't be worried, but in the same vein, they should be.
That's cool.
Because the GTD is cool. Like, it's nasty. It gives you that RS, GT3 RS vibe, with just more rawness, which is a wild thing to say because the GT3 RS is incredibly raw in its own right. But you add a couple cylinders to that bad Larry, and boy, we're going places.
That's so cool. Well, that's good. I think it's nice to have like some aspirational cars that are approvable by a bank.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
not necessarily like, you've got to have those cars that are like, oh my God, why does Steven have this? He's so stupid. I know he doesn't make enough money for that.
Yep.
But so does Steven.
Yep.
But he can
a lot
do
of
it.
kids with M2s.
Yeah. What about, so that covers a lot of American stuff. What about the German market? For me, I used to be really aspirational for M cars and AMG cars and things like that. Like, what is to become, I'm worried about Mercedes right now.
I am very worried about Mercedes. I agree with that statement.
And I used to, BMW irks me, not because of the way their cars drive,
Yeah.
but because of the way they're looking.
Right.
But they have some weird superpower that they can make a car that I'm like, ugh. And then 16 months later, I'm like, hey, that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm over the M3, M4 grill.
Same.
Over it. Love it. I actually like it.
It's okay. It's all right. I see, you know what I really like is a black M2.
Yeah.
I'm like, shit, that's for
Wait, what year?
like the new
yeah,
M2. I'm
yeah.
like, that looks good. You know, maybe it's because it covers up some of the insanity.
Sure, fair play.
But I think it just looks, I'm like, all right, I get it. It makes sense to
Yeah.
me. I mean, I have critiques because I have critiques about everything.
Sure.
It's my job.
Sure.
To be like, I wish there was a little more tactility in the steering and blah, blah, blah. But whatever. That's besides the point.
Yeah.
Are those still or has the reputation changed for those cars where they're still sort of like enthusiast aspirational cars, or are they now just like status symbols or something? Like, what's the difference between an enthusiast car and a status symbol, and do they mix?
To me, the status symbol German brand is Mercedes. Mercedes has almost lost their way and has really just pursued what is visually going to be the most appealing, or what on paper looks the most appealing, right? You think about the new C63, which has a 4-cylinder turbo with the hybrid. But if you look at it on paper, it's got crazy numbers. Just don't look at the weight number, but look at everything else, and they're insane, right? It's a 4-cylinder making all this power, And then you look at the new AMG GTs that are trying to rival the 911. They look fantastic, but they weigh so much, right? So Mercedes is really keying in on this, which they're not wrong to do, this just showy culture, right? Where it's just like you want to have the cool thing because you're taking the pictures for social media, for yourself, you feel better in it, whatever it is, right? I'm very much a proponent of, you do feel better when you drive something better.
Agreed.
There's a video that came out a while ago about a guy who just on a whim bought an Arnage, and he was driving it, and he was saying like, I just feel good in this car, and it just affects your life in so many different aspects.
It's funny because even when they're old, even when you're driving like an 80s Bentley or a 90s Bentley, it's still, even though they're like, by today's standards, like shit.
Right.
Like, but in a lot of ways, I'm not, I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying that, but they're not great cars.
No, yeah, 100%.
You're lucky they start. They, but my God, there's just an involvement with it that's really special.
Yeah. So Mercedes is trying to visually hit that note, in my opinion, right? I think BMW is still producing some exciting things. Like you said, we can argue that the M3, M4 steering is too numb and it's more of a GT car versus something that's playful, and the M2 could do a couple things better. But by and large, like the M340 is a really exciting option if you don't want to go in the M category. The B58 is just a mental motor with tons of power.
It's so good.
And that engine is also available in the X3. It's also available in the X5, right? So you can have this really good drivetrain in a bunch of different options. I think Audi is still doing some good things. The RS3 is insane, right? Just a mental machine that looks iconic, right? And it will look iconic for a long time. The A4 is still decent. The A5's fine. A5 Grand Coupe, fine, right? So there's still good things out there, but I do agree with you. Mercedes, I think, has lost their way almost entirely.
I am also overwhelmed by the number of trim levels and selections. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard. It used to be easier do you remember when there was a 3 Series, a 5 Series, a 7 Series, basically, you know, and then it was like, oh, we're going to do the 6, and then there's a 2, and then then there was a 1, then there's a 2. And by the time you're like, oh my God, we're going to be in double digit numbers for BMWs, you know, it was tricky. And I feel a little overwhelmed by the offerings of these companies. And that, I know, is just me being starting to become a mature person where I'm like, oh God, but it's hard. It's honestly difficult to keep track of like a dozen major brands with 50 cars.
Yeah. The problem with turbos is it's very easy to change power level and attribute it to a new model, right? Like a 330 versus a 340 or a 530 versus a 540 or whatever. It's just a 2-liter turbo with the wick turned up.
Yeah.
It's by and large the same car, but it's just, you know what I mean? I would have preferred them call it the sport package or something like that gives it the power instead of a different moniker. But, you know, gone are the days where you have a 4-cylinder 3 Series, a 6-cylinder 3 Series, and an 8-cylinder 3 Series.
Do you think that we are going to get past this sort of like subscription-based attempt at certain things? Like, you know, we watched BMW try it with heated seats, you know. Obviously, we know that could go much further, where with electric cars, it could literally be like, well, subscribe to 800 horsepower. Right? Do you think that... Two questions. One, what are a couple things or one thing in the industry that you like wish would go away? And two, is there something that like was attempted that died already that you're like, oh, good, this is gone? Like, I feel like these are almost like the way pop-up ads used to happen all the time. And now we don't have those. Yeah. Right. It was like a thing that like plagued us for a little while. And we're like, oh my God, this is the internet. Gross.
Right.
They went away. So what is the current maybe pop-up ad that will die? And I know this is a really tough question to cold call you on.
No, it's fine. I think one of the interesting things that has popped up that I think will go away is piss poor attempts at mild hybrids just to say it's electrified. Ooh. Because people will understand that there is no actual benefit in some scenarios. So a good example is the Rams, right? The Ram 1500 or whatever that has a 3.6 with some weird mild hybrid that only impacts like startup and stop, and the MPG increase is like 1 or 2 to just have way more added complexity for no reason. I think that goes away in light of better plug-in hybrids eventually, right? Because people start to realize that, you know, oh, they really do only drive 30 miles a day, so they don't need something with 1,000 miles of range.
And it really only needs to cover, even if 70% of your driving can be done on a 30 to 40 mile range, well, guess what? That's as much battery as you need.
Yeah, totally.
Done.
So I think a lot of these like flywheel hybrid cars are gone.
Yeah, okay.
Dead and buried. I just because there's no... In my view, there's no reason. It's one thing if you're a series hybrid car, like a Prius, even like some of the 3 Series stuff, some of the 5 Series stuff, whatever, that actually has a meaningful impact to the car's bottom line, where the bottom line is miles per gallon.
Yes.
The other thing you talked about, subscription, I'm curious to see where that ends up, because we're starting a culture more broadly, if we look past the car space, that leans a lot into get something cheaper, but have the ability to add on something later. So a good example is like, I can download a mobile app for free. I'll see ads. If I don't want to see the ads, I pay $5.
Right.
And then I don't see the ads. So, but I got the app for free. So a good example could be in the car world, instead of paying 40 grand for a car, you're spending 38, but you don't get heated seats. If you want to get heated seats, you pay $100 a year. And you're not going to own the car long enough to make up that delta. So for you, it's worth it to do. Right. I do still think that's going to be a thing.
I agree. I think for me, that I look at, if I were thinking like further ahead, it's going to be the fact that our cars are going to be more disposable.
Yeah.
And we're going to look back at all of these Band-Aids and additions for the sake of fuel economy and think, wow, if only these cars lasted another 10 years,
that has the bigger impact.
It wouldn't have mattered. And totally. I think we always miss the big picture on that stuff. But no, that's great. So, all right, Is there anything else that you need to get off your chest about the car industry? Because I want to talk about you a little bit too.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, I think the car industry today, more modern vehicles get way too much flack. I think a lot of people don't give other brands enough credit for pushing brands. And to your earlier point about brand loyalty, I think brand loyalty is the worst thing in any sort of automotive space, whether that's brand or transmission loyalty, the whole manual elitist jerk scene.
Oh, God.
But anyway, I do think today's world, like if you are interested, the car scene is not dead. There are so many tremendous options available in the enthusiast space, from the Supras, the Corollas, the WRXs, to the premium space, the 911s, the Huracans, the 296 GTBs, which are insane.
What a
right?
car.
There's just so many to the lay space. We talked about the CRV. There's so many good things out there. So if you think we've lost our way, you've lost your mind.
yes.
Put it on a shirt, ship it.
I feel
It's
rejuvenated.
true. It's true.
You've really uplifted me a little bit.
Wow,
Because
okay.
sometimes I do get down and I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh no. What? But like, if you just think a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
just think a little bit and look around, you're like, you know what? This shit's pretty good.
Yeah, are there specific elements that suck? Sure. Maybe a car you liked 10 years ago is a shell of what it is today. But there's another car that fills that space. You just got to go for it, right? Which always brings me back to Hyundai. Maybe the Civic isn't the crazy torque scary thing, or maybe the Focus ST doesn't have a new replacement. But hey, if you had a Focus ST, the Elantra ends that car. Go give it a shot.
So I want to talk about you a little bit because you're one of the people that when I go to a car show, if I see you or a Grid Life event and I see you, I'm like, yes. Like I genuinely run to you because you're magnetic, you're exciting, you're
Thank you.
happy, you find joy in the things you're doing. And sometimes, I'm a naturally depressed person. So I have a heart. Like what can you give advice for enthusiasts other than just buying things, or how do we use our cars? Because I find it's tricky sometimes when traffic is crummy. It's like, would I love to drive in the commercial landscape of like, oh my God, I got to drive through the hills to get to the grandma's house to give her whatever, it's like that, those very like commercial scenes. It's not real. Where do I go? What do I do? And how do I bridge this gap between car show and Instagram culture where it's just about like, oh my God, did you see the spec? To actually using your thing responsibly but enthusiastically. Like, where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do with our cars?
Do you remember when we were growing up, and maybe this was just my mom, could have very easily just been my mom, where you were painted by the friends that you kept, right? Like you are who you surround yourself with.
My dad always said you are who your friends are.
And that's way more true in the car space than anything else. That's right. True. Who you surround yourself with and what you're doing, how you're talking, how you're acting, you don't realize it, but it sneaks in, right? So like if you're in a friend group where you guys are just being curmudgeons about a group that's next to you that has things that you don't have, and you find yourself slipping and falling into being that person yourself. And then you lose the love for the things that you have. You lose the love for what used to bring you joy, right? But if you find a way to either surround yourself with or be that person for yourself, dude, it's just such a better experience.
You're totally right.
It's so much better. And that also includes who you're with. I used to have this like perceived notion. I'm no like therapist or guy, but it's just more just
therapize.
Yeah.
Therapize the internet.
I used to have this notion that cars were either a me thing or I was going to like marry or be with somebody that had to be into cars. There's no way. Like I'm so into cars. My partner has to be just as much into them as I. What I've realized is they want to be with you for who you are and what excites you. So if that's the car world, Sure, they may not be into the thing like you are. They might not go up to Icon Suburban and be like, wow, the color on the wheels perfectly matches the color of the body, and the stance of this thing is insane. Look how the headlights fit. Look at the trim, the fit, the finish. They might not care about that level of detail, but they care about the passion that you have for something else because they see the excitement, they see the happiness, right? But just like they'll be there for you, you also have to be there for them. So just surrounding yourself with folks that are like that, that just care about well-being and less about the next thing has been huge for me in the car world.
Such good advice.
It's also why I don't talk to anybody anymore. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, I mean this in like the nicest possible way, but I have like my friend circle is much tighter than it once was. And it is exactly for that reason, because there are people that just, you might, like when you're young, being mean is like fun.
Yeah, it's the in thing.
You know, when I say young, I mean like you discover this when you're in kindergarten.
100%.
You know, like trust me, I was the butt of that. I was
me too. Yeah.
And, you know, and it's like, oh, those kids are friends because they're mean to me together. Like that's their thing.
That's their friendship.
Right.
Right.
And you find that everywhere. That never ends, by the way.
And it never will.
Hey, youngsters. It doesn't get better.
Totally.
There will always be people who are like after you or whatever. And that's fine. Like you have to accept a level of that, and you have to be okay with yourself.
Right.
You have to make sure that you keep your side of the street clean, right? In the car world, it's weird because there's two sides to it. There's the passionate side where, of course, you're a person who loves motorsports. You love cars, you love engines, you love design, you love just things in motion. You love controlling a thing in motion. But then there's also this materialistic side of it. And that is something that I have a really hard time reconciling, because I always try to make sure that whenever I'm like expressing like lust or love for an object, for like a car, I don't also want it to be because of materialism. Materialism feels exciting.
Yeah.
It feels really good. Like I think when I was a teenager, early teenager, you're waiting to get your license. You see a BMW M3, you see a Ferrari, an NSX. That feeling you get is materialism.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh God, why isn't my dad rich?
Yeah.
You know, like
why not my dad?
Why not my dad? Why isn't he dropping? You know, and you're like, I want the thing. And I think the way to determine if it's passion or materialism is like, did I envision driving it alone, or did I envision getting picked up or arriving somewhere in the thing?
Yeah, totally.
And if you just envisioned yourself arriving in the Lamborghini, it wasn't because of the passion. It was because you wanted to be seen as passionate.
Right. But then along those lines, if you build on that further, people that view it as I'm arriving in X car miss out on so many good machines.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's weird, because at the same time you could argue that like, well, of course I want to arrive in the thing. It represents me. And that's a different story that, you know, and there's so many nuances to all of this, but I have friends who, you know, were at Garage 42. I'm looking at some of their collection right now.
Yep.
A person who doesn't like have passion for cars could look at some of these cars and just say like, they just want stuff. They're just materialistic.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, I assure you, regardless of the price tag on some of this shit, someone who is not passionate does not build that Icon Suburban.
Right.
Someone who is not passionate does not get like carbon barrel wheels for an SL65 Black Series. Someone who is passionate doesn't put money into a 2005 Maybach.
Right.
Because that car is passe as far as like, if you're a rich guy,
right?
I mean,
it's old stock.
That's old. I mean, maybe old money looks a certain way or whatever,
Sure,
but
point.
like it's not new,
right?
And so to me, it's like and that's where the Porsche, like a new Porsche, always rides that boundary for me, because you're like, ooh, look at the spec, look at the color, look at the wheels, look at the this, look at the that. And it's like, cool. Like, are you driving it? And I don't know. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm not like, oh, you don't drive your cars. Some people just buy things because they're beautiful and they want to put them somewhere, and that's fine too.
Totally.
I just know that like for me, I'm happiest when I'm on an adventure and I'm using the thing, and those fleeting moments where the odometer doesn't matter is really special to me.
In a world
where Tom isn't recording his odometer for taxes. No, but like I'm so guilty of this, and that's why I'm talking about it, because I know that like I look at my M5 and I'm like, it's got 82,000 miles, and then like if next year it has 90, I'm like, fuck. I don't know, who cares?
Yeah.
Who the fuck cares?
Yeah. I got chewed out is too strong of a word or phrase, but it's what I'm going to go with.
Sure. Yeah.
Before my Tacoma, I had a 96 318. Right? So like a 1996 BMW 318. And someone came up to me and they were like, why? You're X, Y, and Z person with ABC job. What are you doing in a $4,000 BMW? And my only response was like, it's not the price of the car. It's the experience that I want out of the car. I don't care if that's a $4,000 manual 100 horsepower 318 or a $400,000 Rezvani RR1.
Great.
Yeah,
take.
We'll throw out a random car name.
Oh man.
It's what you want out of the machine, right? And that to me was so interesting, because I had to think to myself, like, what led, and I've been trying to do this with a lot of other things too, what led to that decision by that person to say those things to me about that 318?
It's very curious what people, and it's, you know what the weirdest thing is, this person was thinking about me.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
Like I mean, look, as internet personalities, there's going to be people who are thinking about you because you're literally publishing things all the time.
Extremely ridiculously good looking.
Yeah. I get that every morning. I wake up to that.
It's nuts.
It's just constant nice comments.
Can we stop?
They're like, wow, I know you're building an ego. Yeah. No, it's like, but it is weird when you realize that like, oh, there are people that like actively pay attention to you, that are like questioning what you're doing, and you're like, and it's weird because on the one hand you're like, this is none of your business. On the other hand, you're like, I guess I've kind of made it your business.
Yeah. Oh, fair
like,
point.
But it is weird when someone like questions why people question why I bought a Lexus GX.
Yeah.
But like the people who got it. They were like, no, that's like, yes, you're allowed to have a normal, robust, luxurious daily driver.
Yeah. But I think it also shows, right? Like the differing vehicles that you have aren't because you're trying to give off a certain image with any of those vehicles. It's because the experience, the memories, the attachments that are associated with those cars are what they are.
Yeah.
Right? Like you didn't buy the Lexus so that you could go get your nails done at the Lexus dealer for service. Although that's just a tremendous perk.
I really do need to get my tires rotated, which I could do, but maybe I should just go there and have them do my nails.
Hey, I'm just saying.
That's not a joke to anyone listening, by the way. There is a nail salon.
Real thing.
That's a real thing. There's a nail salon at the Lexus Watertown dealership, and probably a lot of them. It might be a thing. Is that just like a Lexus thing?
Could be. So while you can rotate your wheels and tires at Garage 42, I don't think we have a nail salon downstairs just yet.
Edwin.
Yeah, if you're listening.
Edwin, learn how to do nails. Could you imagine Edwin taking your hand and just shooting the shit with you doing your nails?
Yeah, that's a hell of a conversation.
David, we have things to talk about.
Yeah, just ideas, you know?
I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, have you seen a Lexus dealer? Anyway, I think it's true though, right? Like when you start to associate things with the memories or the feelings that you have, and you care less about what it is, that's when you start to go along with it. Like my Integra Type S that I had, being able to go to events that I went to with my old Acura, my first car, going to the track, going on back roads with my partner, with family. That was like, those experiences will be with me forever. And it was what gave me such a glowing view of that car.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was an Acura. It wasn't that it was gold. It wasn't that it was whatever. It was what you did in the thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I need to do more with the I actively need to do more with the cars that I own.
Sure. Okay.
And I just, sometimes I'm like, it's like when you're young and, you know, let's say you're just out of college and you don't really know how to have a social life yet.
Yeah.
And you're like, because you're used to being in a dorm.
Totally.
And so you start looking around, and like the question I always asked was like, what do people do?
Yeah.
Like, what do people do? Are we
Right.
just supposed to go get drunk at a bar and like
Right.
get an Uber home? Is that it? Is that all we do?
Is that the thing?
Is that all we do?
Yeah.
Is there more? And once in a while you find like, a group where you're like, oh no, like we go running every Friday night, or we like to like rock climb and boulder at these cliffs and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, and so, you fall into a group of some sort of activity. And with the cars, I'm like, yes, we have like large entertaining cars and coffee. We have grid life events. I think I'm kind of a Forza Horizon personality where like the more laid back and less commitment, the better.
Yes,
So
totally.
for me, it's like really nice if I could just kind of like get up and go for a drive in the mountains.
Yep.
And not have to like plan it for 6 months.
Yep. Totally.
But it's hard to do that because when you don't plan, things suck.
Right.
So I'm looking for that level of like, okay, well, like there's got to be an intersecting point where like low planning, high reward. I get to drive cars and have fun. They don't break, and I have cell service if they do.
Yep. When I was living in California for a bit, I had an NDRF Club Miata, incredible machine to have in California, and I actually blocked on my calendar drive days. Every week, I would go to one of the canyons for 3 hours and just drive. And for me, that was like the best feeling.
It's incredible to have that ability. And that's what's so unique about Los Angeles is that, yes, it is notorious for its nightmare highway or freeways. And it's a rough city to live in.
Sure.
It is hard. You have to be a little tough. I mean, it's not New York, but there's a difference.
Yeah.
It's a very driver focused city, and driving is not seen as an exciting activity there by most, but you drive up to Malibu, you go to Point Doom, you go up to Angeles Crest. There's this culture very close. And I wish there was something along those lines in New England.
Agreed.
It's really hard. There's little pockets of it, right?
Yep.
You've got the Adrian Cars and Coffee, but there's no like wild roads down there. You're in an island. You're in Newport.
Right.
You've got hayfields. Great, but from what I've seen in they just had their kickoff or whatever.
Okay.
A lot of police interference.
Oh, interesting.
And they were, it wasn't like people were I don't think people were being lunatics. Maybe there were some, I'm not sure. But I know people that were like out of state people getting tickets for no front plates.
Wow, nice.
Which was like, ooh, that's a statement.
Yeah, that's tough.
That means more than you think. That's saying we don't want you.
Yeah, that's the Malibu Cars and Coffee. You got to get out of here.
You can't
kind of
park
thing.
here.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's these statements that are made a little bit, they're not very surreptitious, but
Right.
we know what it means
Right.
when front plate people are ticketed in front of a car show.
Right.
That's not because we're welcome there.
Sure.
Which
Agreed.
I run front plates. I got pulled over twice.
Oh, you do? Interesting.
I got pulled over twice in 1 mile in 2 towns in the Type R
What?
last year. I was coming
Tell
home.
me what town so I can stay away
Off the record,
with my
I will.
no front plate. Just kidding. It's definitely there. Toyota Tacoma.
It was nuts. I couldn't believe it. It was so crazy. And this is why I believe we are living in a simulation, because I got a text message that morning from my friend JP. And
Okay.
he said, "Hey Tom, I don't want to run a front plate on my M5. Have you ever been pulled over or given any trouble for not running a front plate on your Honda Civic Type R?"
So he said 7 at a craps table.
And yes. And I wrote back, haven't had a problem yet. And then 3 hours later, I had to talk to 2 cops about it.
That's
and
insane.
The thing was, after the first one pulled me over, I'm like, all right, I'll go put it on.
Yeah,
I'm like,
sure. No problem.
That's why I have front plates on all my other cars. I was testing the waters.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't want to give people a reason to talk to me.
Sure.
At the fuck all.
Yeah.
And I'm not like a big proponent of authority.
Yeah.
I
I don't know what an inspection sticker is. That's my dirty secret.
I've been keeping my shit so tight and like on the up and up, but like
Proud of you.
I try. And the thing was with that car, I was just like, well, let's
Yeah.
just see. Cause it looks so good without
Yeah,
it. And
agreed.
everyone was giving me shit for it. And I shouldn't have listened to everybody. I should
Yeah.
have just done what I was supposed to do.
Sure.
So yeah, I got pulled over twice. And
Did you drill into it?
no, you drill into luckily Honda doesn't make you drill through the bumper. They drill through the black plastic that's like the insert.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's-
cool.
Yeah, so
Love
it doesn't
Okay.
ruin anything.
Nice.
And that was really nice. But yeah, so whenever people give me crap about front plates, I'm like, buddy,
Yeah.
I got the second time I got pulled over too. They pulled me over like 100 feet from my house.
Same town.
2 towns.
Ah, okay. Got it.
And I was like, that guy the first guy was way nicer. The second guy seemed like it was his first day on the job. And I was
Yikes.
really not very polite.
Yeah, I've been pulled over for some wild scenario. I got pulled over for window tint, but because in Massachusetts they can't pull you over for window tint.
it's
At
gotta
least
be a
they couldn't at the
secondary.
time. It has to be secondary.
Yeah.
So I got pulled over, and you know how on some highways where the lights come up and the speed drops?
Yes.
So I got pulled over for maintaining highway speed in those sections.
How dare
and he
you.
wrote on my registration, tint 10% warning. Like wrote with a pen on my registration. I was livid, but I took him off.
Luckily, I prefer a fishbowl, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, and it's better for my job because the POV looks better when you don't
Yeah,
have tint.
true.
So I'm able to do that better. But like, yeah, I'm always kind of blown away by the level of infractions people blatantly do from a style standpoint, whether a front plate or tint or like, some crazy loud low exhaust or something
Yeah.
like that. And then they're like, I can't believe I got pulled over. And I was
Insert
like,
Pikachu face. What?
I know. I'm like, moi? Yeah, it's so crazy. So you're like, I don't know. But all right, we've definitely probably gone over our hour.
Oh boy.
Where can people find you?
Oh, I am located on www.youtube.com/moneyshift. That is money like the greenbacks that you don't carry in your wallet.
Anymore.
Yeah. And for those that don't know what money shifting is, I'm not going to, it's 5 to 1.
Yeah.
We'll just put it that way.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just for the love of God, don't do
That's
it.
the main place you can find me. I'm on all the other social medias too, but that's the main place.
Great. YouTube Money Shift.
Yeah.
Love it. You are you're an encyclopedia of knowledge. You're an encyclopedia of ever incoming knowledge. So that's what I'm into because I rely on you sometimes where I'm like, you absorb the world and filter through it, whereas I absorb the world and panic. And you're like, oh, these go in these categories. Here are these buckets. And I'm just like, what do I do with all this shit? And like, and you're
It's
like,
just exciting.
yeah. And I think you see like corporate strategies as they're occurring
Yeah.
faster than most. And so
Oh,
I think that's
interesting. Thank you.
fascinating to me. Like I see that you can tell, you're like, oh, they've just come out with this. That can't be good.
Yeah.
Like-
the downfall.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
You know,
Yeah.
so I feel like I'm always interested to see what your perspective is on like a brand where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, is this a good thing?
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
No, you're super knowledgeable and also just a great friend. So I like having you around. Thank you for coming
Anytime.
on.
Literally anytime. Thank you for having me. Thank you to G42, man. Garage 40. This place is, and the drive here, I just got to say, when you see bees in people's yards, that's when you know your car is in a safe location.
This is why I like coming here because even the roads around here, you kind of get this sensation of like, rather than like, oh God.
Yeah.
You know, it's relaxing to be here. And
Yeah.
it's nice. So thank you to Garage 42 for hosting this lovely podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thanks for watching the YouTube channel, supporting, whether you're watching and just hitting that like button, making some comments, or supporting financially by throwing $1 at that Patreon every month. You won't even notice it.
Yeah.
You drop $1 every couple of days. You don't even know it.
That's true.
Just drop it on Tedward. Drop
Yeah.
it on old Tedward.
Por que no?
Poor Kano. Give old Teddy a small drip brew coffee every
Yeah.
quarter. You know, that's all.
Delicious.
It's just $1. Yeah, because I don't want your. I mean, like, look, there's people. If you're gonna throw me a lot of money, great. But like, then I feel pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure is the antithesis of my creation.
Sure. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
It's
I don't
scary.
disagree with that.
If someone literally came here and was like, Tom, I believe in what you're doing. Here's $250,000.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Psych.
I'd be like, could you just find 250,000 people to give me $1?
Right. Yeah. Please. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
We'll just keep it cool. Keep it tidy. So, all right, don't forget to respect the drive, and we'll see you in the next one.